Doreen 𝗏𝗏𝗂𝗏 is the
Dr. Doreen is an expert in autism.
Doreen 𝗏𝗏𝗂𝗏.
Dr. 𝗏𝗏𝗂𝗏.
Dr. Doreen 𝗏𝗏𝗂𝗏.
Dr. Doreen 𝗏𝗏𝗂𝗏 is a visionary in the field of autism. Now you can ask her questions on Ask Dr. Doreen. My child isn't making progress. What have I overlooked? Which I love talking about this topic with Dr. 𝗏𝗏𝗂𝗏 because she is the master at this. The first question is, and then we're going to open it up to questions you guys are already sending in and questions that you're about to send in. But the first question is, my child is about to be 5. We have been doing ABA for the last 2 years. We started during the shutdown with just parent training, but now he goes to the center 3 afternoons a week for 2 hours. He is on the gluten-free, milk-free diet. I feel like we're doing everything right, but he is still only saying about 5 words. We are still having lots of hitting and aggression towards his baby sister, and no one can get any rest. He is often up all night for days on end. What am I missing? Please help. And I'm sending this parent a hug right to start. But I'm so glad that they wrote in this question, Dr. 𝗏𝗏𝗂𝗏, because you could take the whole hour on this, could you not?
Yeah, really could. And this is a topic that's very dear to my heart because it's all too common, the situation that parents feel like they're doing everything, but actually there are some really important aspects missing. So let's talk about that. I think in general, it's just important to remember that we're looking at trying to do everything to make the child healthy, first of all, from a medical, physical perspective. So that means the very, very first thing is sleep. And sleep is super, super important because the whole concept of ABA is about intensive teaching. And let's face it, if any of us don't get enough sleep, we are also not going to do very well learning. So I would really recommend that you talk with some specialists. And this goes beyond your pediatrician. I think for me, when I'm looking at underlying health issues that are out of the ordinary, I will not really go to my family physician or, in this case, a pediatrician. I like to talk to functional medicine physicians because they are the ones that try to help you figure out what's causing the problem, and then also will give you more natural supplements that will help solve the problem. So the first thing is making sure that the child is receiving any kind of intervention that they need for sleep. Now, when it is an issue with not sleeping, you usually have various types of supplements that can help, forms of magnesium, melatonin, of course. There's lots of different things that can help. But then also, sometimes our kids don't sleep just because when they wake up in the middle of the night, they come over to us and they prefer to sleep in our bed, and or they want to drink, and something happens during the night that it becomes a kind of a conditioned behavior for them to wake up. So you need to make sure that you're also not just depending on supplementation or medication, but you're looking at all the possible things that could be either waking your child up or keeping your child up. And, you know, our kids are very sensitive to sound, for instance. A lot of times I find that our kids are waking up in the middle of the night because that's when, let's say, we have our sprinklers set to turn on, or, you know, the dog next door, or something is waking the child up. And then the way that we interact with the child during the night maintains them, like keeps them waking up. So that becomes really important. You need to figure out the sleep patterns because, you know, there's a big correlation with autism or autism-related behaviors and our neurotransmitters. And when you don't get enough sleep, you're just not able to produce sufficient amounts of the right neurotransmitters. So sleep is important. Secondly, any other type of health issue for a lot, I always repeat this now because I can never forget that one time I did an evaluation for a family, and the evaluation was, almost 2 hours of me asking questions. And then at the very, very end, the parent, I said, is there anything else? And they said, oh yeah, by the way, he also has diarrhea about 10 times a day. He's always had it his whole life. The doctor told me that's part of the autism. It is not. It is not. Any kind of gastrointestinal issues, any kind of abdominal, whether it's inflammation, redox, just irritation from various foods, all of those types of things need to be handled and dealt with, because again, these are things that are not only keeping the child uncomfortable, but also possibly affecting the immune system, which is mostly in the GI tract. And then we have other problems if our immune systems are not working correctly. So health is very, very important. Along with health comes diet. And I know this parent wrote that their child, I believe they said, casein and gluten, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, they said gluten and milk-free.
Right. So the milk is essentially casein, and that's important. It's the protein in milk and the protein in whole grains, which is gluten. And so those are two things, and a lot of kids have difficulty digesting those particular products, but they could also be reacting to corn, to soy, to food additives, to food coloring. I mean, there's a ton of stuff. So it would be very important, again, to identify a nutritionist or dietitian, or again, a functional medicine doctor who can help. And you can not just do urine analysis and stool sample analysis, but also, of course, there are blood tests. Nowadays, there's even just kits that you can get in the mail, and you can put a portion of the stool in there and mail it back, and they'll give you a huge array of all the foods that your child might be, we say allergic, but really it basically they're having a hard time breaking those foods down. That's important for a lot of different reasons, and I'm happy to talk about that on a different show, but it really is very important to get the diet right. Then when you get the diet right, and the health and the sleep, and you are paying attention to the sensory issues with the child, that's also important, because some of our kids learn visually, other kids learn auditorily. Not all of our kids have the ability to receive information with all of their senses. And also sometimes our kids have a very significant need to have certain types of sensory stimulation. And this is what we refer to as sensory dysregulation. Like they have certain needs, and they have certain resistances or things that bother them from sensory input. So it becomes important to know your child. Like, what is their learning style? Do they learn better if they have a visual stimulus? Are they sensitive to sounds that you want to make sure you keep away from them? That's important, because a lot of the ABA then is taught using those sensory modalities that works for your child. I might have an ABA program for one child, which is completely verbal in instructions, and another child where all the instructions are visual. And that's important, because if you don't recognize those differences, you're just making it harder for the child to learn. Now, when you have all that information, you want to do a good ABA program. And the biggest issue I see right now is the question that we had is that the child is only receiving 6 hours a week of ABA. And that's so important to discuss, because like I said, we often think 6 hours, that's got to be sufficient, because I only do like maybe 2 hours of speech therapy or 3 hours of occupational therapy. But ABA is different. ABA has been proven to be very effective when it is intensive. And I know it's hard for us to imagine this, but when I say intensive, I'm talking about something like 6 hours a day of ABA. So the ideal amount of ABA varies per child, but we know that every additional hour will have an impact. So when a child is younger, we try to give them as much as we possibly can, often 40 hours a week of one-to-one ABA, where they're just soaking in this information and just absorbing it and learning. And as they get older and other obligations enter their lives, like education or school, whatever it might be, then we have no choice but to reduce the amount of ABA because they have all these other things they have to do. But again, the more ABA, the better. When you have a child who has aggression and they're only receiving 6 hours of ABA, what that means is that during that 6 hours, they're getting a set of rules and people are managing them and interacting with them in a certain way. Then the rest of the time, they're under a completely different set of rules. And this causes confusion, and this causes the child to continue to aggress because there's no one set of rules. So for instance, if you're in an ABA session and there's aggression, everyone has figured out, hopefully you have a board certified behavior analyst who's figured out what the function of the aggression is. Why is the child aggressing? Always these challenging behaviors are a form of communication. So the child is trying to say something. They're trying to either gain access to something or avoid something. And in ABA, we try to teach the child to use more adaptive, more functional ways of communicating rather than hitting or being aggressive. How often does those same set of rules occur outside of the ABA? In other words, when the child's in school or with you or out and about and they aggress, what happens? I am pretty sure that the way that things are managed are not identical to the way they're managed inside the ABA session. And honestly, that's part of the reason that we want to do intensive ABAs, because when you do, 5, 6 hours of ABA a day, the child learns very, very, very quickly what the rules are and how to communicate without using challenging behaviors. So, and of course, obviously, every child will benefit from additional tutoring or learning new skills. So my biggest suggestion to this viewer is increase your ABA hours right away, as much as you possibly can. And that is probably the best thing you can do right now.
Thank you so much for that thorough answer, Dr. 𝗂𝗓𝗂𝗧. I just so appreciate getting to spend time with you because you speak sanity, and I love that. And a lot of people out there are speaking insanity. I had a parent recently, it broke my heart. She wrote to me and said, I recently left my ABA provider and went to a different ABA provider. And I said, why? What kinds of things were you seeing? And she said, well, they were constantly pressuring me to do more hours because I was only doing 15 hours with my 4-year-old. And they were constantly pushing for more hours, and that she had read on some mom's group that was because they just wanted more money. And she said, and I don't want to be pressured for something so that they can make more money. So she moved ABA providers. And I said, my gosh, I would have given you the exact opposite advice, that if you're with an ABA provider who, and you have less than 25 hours and your child is less than 6 and they're not pressuring you for more hours, then I'm seriously wondering what their motives are. Because it isn't about the money, it becomes, I think, and tell me if I'm wrong, that everything gets easier if you're doing more because the child learns faster, which means the team gets more excited. The child is less frustrated. Parents get on board because they see, oh my gosh, this works. I want to do what you're doing at home, and everything gets easier. But if we're doing too few hours, it's the child gets frustrated, and why wouldn't they? And confused, as you said, confused. So thank you for speaking sanity, Dr. 𝗂𝗂𝗓𝗂𝗧. I just want to make it so that everybody can hear your voice. Okay, let's
Shannon, I also, I guess people don't realize that if it was all about making money, there are thousands of children waiting on these wait lists. So this supervisor who is insisting you should do more hours could also do more hours with other kids, right?
Yeah.
So that's how that argument is out. And parents should also know that payers, insurance companies, argue with our supervisors against giving a child more hours, because from the payer's perspective, the less they pay, the better. So they actually don't want to give intensive hours. So kudos to whoever the supervisor is who's arguing with you and telling you you need more hours. They're simply only doing that for your child's benefit. It's not for their own benefit. The payer will be angry with them. It's harder to staff intensive hours. So they're doing it only for your child's benefit.
So think of it like that person is Norma Ray. You want, like, they're willing to fight for your child. You wanna keep them. Okay. Don't forget, you can watch Ask Dr. Doreen live every Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. Pacific time. We hope to see you there.